Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, last night I finally got to play Fantasy Flight game Star Wars, and we played Edge of the Empire. And Eloy was nice enough to actually run the game for us. And Complex Games apologist, myself, Jason, Dark Age Roleplay game, and Eloy's friend Jose all played. And it was actually, I didn't realize, because Eloy and I had been talking about this game for a while, I didn't realize it was actually only his third time actually playing the game, and only his first time running it. So considering all that, considering the rest of us were all newbies, I'm pretty sure that Jose had never actually played it before either. None of us ever had. It went really, really well. And so I want to talk about some of my impressions of that. I'll talk a little bit about Roll20 again. But it was a really cool experience, so I wanted to give you some of my impressions about this. And my history with Star Wars is an interesting one. Obviously, sometimes you see all the junk back there. And, Star Wars was a movie that I used to quip to my friends all the time. That was a movie that changed my life. And in a lot of ways, it was a revolutionary movie. And I'm not going to go into all the details of why it was a revolutionary movie, but you can find out all kinds of information. But it was just for sci-fi. The ships were dirty. Everything looked like it was used. It was very cinematic. I didn't realize at the time when I was a kid that there was a lot of pulp heroics going on in that original movie and in the movies. I didn't realize there was a whole hero's journey and the classic stuff. In fact, I was talking about this. I made an internal video to the other people in the group as we were the next day we were just talking about our impressions, and Eloy kind of mentioned back that it is like the mythology of our age or our generation. And when he says our generation, I believe Eloy and Jason are just a little bit younger than I am, but we're a little bit older. But people that were kids when Star Wars came out, it was just pretty amazing. And in a lot of ways, it informed, I would say, probably like my fantasy life as a kid. It was one of those really giant influences. Star Trek was another big giant influence. Tolkien was reading Narnia, reading all the books and watching all the stuff that I did as a kid. But Star Wars was a big part of it. So here's the interesting thing. Like, I never really wanted to play in a Star Wars role-playing game. And I have some videos out there on YouTube. You could probably find them somewhere where I talk about the idea that I didn't like playing games that were like intellectual properties where they already had established canon. Because, like, you don't necessarily get to blow up the Death Star. I've kind of made my peace with that and become a lot more zen about playing in established worlds, over time. And certainly the way that Fantasy Flight Games has done this, especially with the Edge of the Empire, where you are playing the people on the kind of the underbelly, in the outer rim, the scum and villainy. You don't necessarily have to be bad guys. You can be a lovable scoundrel like Han Solo or something like that. Very appealing. However, it's interesting. I started to become really intrigued by the narrative dice system, and I believe I probably got exposed to that by watching Runeslinger's videos, and I started to watch the videos on the Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars, and I remember talking to him a few times, and I become more and more intrigued, but I just wasn't like, I'm not sure if I really want to play Star Wars. And I heard that they were coming out with a generic system. I got the Genesis system PDF when it came out. And I read it, and I knew all the issues that people had with it, where it was just kind of like going to be Star Wars with the serial numbers filed off, which it is. And I still need to make a review of that game. But one of the things that happened is, as I read it, I really loved what the narrative dice system did. It certainly enforces and informs a very Star Wars feel, where you've got this success but with threat. Or you've got a failure. However, there's some kind of advantage. There's a triumph. It always feels like the music should be going on when you're rolling these dice. There's always this, compared to Star Trek. Star Trek is this kind of a slow boil. I think some of us in the group were talking today. I think CJ actually mentioned that. Where Star Wars is this frenetic, bam, bam, bam. The next thing happens. The next thing happens. You have some kind of success, but oh my God, here come the stormtroopers, whatever. And it's this constant snowball effect. The narrative dice system definitely enforce and inform and create that sort of feel. And it's interesting to see what else you could do with that, like what other genres you can go into with that, which I think is part of the appeal of Genesis. But the point is, once I read that, it really made me want to play Star Wars. So I kind of had to laugh at myself. So, and I knew that I wanted to play Edge of the Empire. That was the one that really appealed to me the most, although I really wanted to try all of them out. So I kind of jumped at the chance to go ahead and play. And so I really dug the narrative dice system. Let me talk about Roll20 first. Part of what we ended up doing was we used Discord for video and voice, which once again, Discord works really, really well. It doesn't have that time lag that Hangouts does. So it is something I'm becoming more and more interested in. The Roll20 we use for two reasons. Eloy used that to do a little bit of, here's a map of something. We spent a good amount of time in this one cantina. Not real game time, but just, out of character game time, because we moved a little slowly, and I'll talk about that. And so we used that. He had the ability to move little counters around, like where we were, and that had some problems. But we also used it for the dice roller. And part of the thing about the Fantasy Flight games, Star Wars narrative dice or the Genesis narrative dice, is there's sort of I love physical dice. These are proprietary dice. They have symbols on them. I really dig them. I really dig the way it works. And you can go watch other people's videos and how it actually works. But they're the kind of dice where you want to all be leaning over the table watching them get rolled and say, "Oh man, I can't believe that's horrible. We're in serious trouble now," or "That's amazing." That's the kind of feel. So having something like an online dice roller where you can all see them, boom, here's the result, is really, really cool. In a lot of other games I play, if you've had nothing to do and you watched me play things like Lamentations of the Flame Princess or whatnot online, I generally just it's all honor system. Just go roll your dice at home, tell me what you got. This is different. You kind of want to see that. And we found the dice roller was hiccuping quite a bit. There may be some problems with the Roll20 dice roller for that particular game. And in general, Roll20, for me, we had a bunch of problems with it. I'm not a big fan of Roll20. And we started talking afterwards about the idea that, it would be really kind of neat to have a picture of some place so we can kind of picture what this place looks like first, and then we can use theater of the mind to figure out where we are and what we're doing. And we can just share a picture. And the other thing is we'd want to have some kind of online dice roller, and for the rest of it, just have some audio like Discord. That would work fine. We talked a little bit about this dice roller. I think it's called Owen Mead, something like that. I didn't have a chance to try it. The guys tried it a little bit, and apparently it's something that you can actually share and see each other's results at the same time, which is kind of what you're going for. But anyhow, enough about the technical glitches. But part of it though, part of why things took so long is not only were we learning Fantasy Flight Star Wars, but we were also kind of learning Roll20, and so that was a bit of a problem. So I prefer to learn just one thing at a time. Thank you very much. But I understand it's great because we get to play and we're in various different places. So not crying, just saying let's try to do this a little bit different would be cool. Actually, figuring out how the game works, it was a little bit slow because we're all new. We're all figuring out how to interpret these dice. Most of the time was really spent trying to make these dice pulls on the darn dice roller. So it probably would have gone a lot faster if we were in person or using a different dice roller. So the original clunkiness and slowness, Jason kind of quipped that we didn't get a lot done in the 2 hours or so that we played, which is true, but it was a bit of learning curve, and a lot of that was kind of being fought. We felt like the technology was fighting us a little bit, is my point. Anyhow, the narrative dice system is really, really cool, and one of I think probably the biggest opportunity, one of the steepest learning curves to this narrative dice system is figuring out how to narratively represent and not codify, but come up with some sort of hierarchy with, how much advantage or disadvantage, how much, threat. When you get 2 or 3 advantage or 5 advantage or triumph, or you get, several threat or despair, outside of combat, which has very codified, there's tables. This is what you can buy with this. This is what kind of the sort of effects that you'll get from this much despair, this much threat, or this much advantage or triumph. That gives you sort of those charts right there. It's the 2 or 3 charts. They give you kind of a baseline, but it's for combat. But then outside of combat type situations, which happen all the time, and especially using other skills during a combat, I think the biggest challenge, and a good challenge, is figuring out, okay, well, what's fair? When we get 3 advantage in a situation, how can we narrate that? Which is fair, when we're not overstepping our bounds, but we're not selling ourselves short either. And that's something I'm looking forward to exploring with that particular group. And it had me thinking for a second that I wonder, in various groups, in various cultures of play, if you will, of Star Wars, I imagine there's groups which have a certain take on what this much advantage and threat is worth, or this much despair or triumph. And if you go down the street, there might be another group where they're much more liberal with it. And if a guy from the liberal group goes into the group that's a little bit more conservative and plays with them and says, and he narrates what his 3 advantage give him in a scene, I wonder if the other group would be like, whoa, you're taking quite a bit of liberty there, and vice versa. and it kind of made me smile a little bit. Like it reminds me of sort of like the OSR thing where you have two different groups in some place and they interpret things a little bit differently. I'm not sure if that's really true. That was just something that kind of made me smile as I was thinking about it this morning driving to work. But it's something I'm really interested in checking out and examining with this group. I really like the way those dice work. You know, where you find out whether you succeed. Sometimes you can have a little bit of a degree of success, but then there's all these other complications or other advantages or really great advantages, you know, triumphs and despairs thrown in, which is very Star Wars. And it can be very, very swingy and very, very cinematic. And I think the more comfortable we get with those dice, the more comfortable we get with some of the rules, because we had to look some stuff up. And, you know, how does this work a few times? I can see that game being very, very fast. I believe there's this kind of like real steep learning curve in the beginning, and then after that I think you can kind of really get to the point where it's really, really smooth. So, you know, that's what it looks like to me right off the bat. And so I'm looking forward to playing more of this, and also there's talk of playing some other games just using Genesis and seeing what else we can do with it, with you know, some of those people, depending on like availability and what have you. So I'm really pumped about that. So overall, I have nothing but good things to say about the system. I was really excited to play it. And once again, like I said about Star Trek, it is more rules medium. It's got a little bit more moving parts than what I'm normally used to. But you know, I remember just reading through the Genesis book itself. You know, it made sense to me. I'm thinking, this is kind of intuitive. We would have to learn a few things and remember some stuff and go back and look it up in the book. But it wouldn't be any different than learning something like Ubiquity, where like once you got it, it's like, okay, this makes a lot of sense, and you can just see the potential in this particular game. It was fun. We had this one moment in the game where, you know, I'm playing a droid, and we were playing out of a beginner game, but I made my own character. I just went to the actual, you know, Edge of the Empire book and created a character. And Sam kind of quipped to me. And Sam did not get to play, by the way, which was sad. Hopefully we get to play with him soon. Sam quipped to me, well, you ought to make a really annoying character, or, you know, real wise ass, if you'll excuse the term. And I was like, oh my God, am I being typecast here, Sam? You know, do I play characters like that? But, you know, I thought about it. He said, actually, you know what, you should play a droid kind of like the droid in Rogue One, whose name I forget. And that started to appeal to me. I didn't really think about playing a droid. So I ended up making a droid, making him sort of like a smaller 6-foot version of that particular droid, making him a pilot, which really helped out. And then Eloy, you know, mentioned that, well, in that case, you're going to have to name him 1V4N. And write that down, and you'll figure out why that's funny. But we had this one scene in this cantina. We're being chased. We're being chased by these Gamoran guard type guys, you know, sent to us by Timo the Hutt to come you know, grab us. And my droid kind of goes in the backstage area. There is no other exit out of this place. And I narrate during what is now a combat. And I have no weapons. I have nothing good to offer here at this particular point. But I'm looking for something useful. And so I go in the back room. I'm searching around. Clearly, this is a dive. There must be more people with weapons here than just, you know, the Gamorreans that just came in here. This is pretty, you know, it's, for crying out loud, it's a wretched hive of scum and villainy, right? And I roll some great successes. I actually find, you know, underneath the dancer's clothes an actual like carbine is what Eloy decided I'd found. At that point, I had Triumph to deal with, and we weren't sure. Like, you know, once again, this is one of those things where we're not sure. Like, how do we narrate this? And I'm thinking, what would I do with this? And Eloy finally mentioned, well, you know, you could just blast a hole in the wall and make yourself that back exit. And so this was very Star Wars. I'm not sure how kosher that was in the moment. We were allowed to talk about this a little bit more. So I imagined this droid just kind of just blasting the heck out of this back wall. And then I leaned my head back into the main room and said, I found the back entrance. Very, very Star Wars. And so, you know, that's the kind of thing where we're kind of examining and exploring and, you know, figuring the game out, figuring, well, how do we narrate these triumphs and what have you. So, you know, hats off to Eloy for coming up with a creative solution when I was a little bit stuck. So, really like the game. And so I'm rambling now, so I'm going to stop the video. Once again, it turned out to be a little bit long, but, you know, I dig it. So I'm having fun. These are games I said I wanted to explore in the beginning, you know, during 2018, and I'm really pumped because I'm getting to actually play these games. So things are going relatively well. Hope things are going well for you in your gaming life.